Good morning. So, how's everybody doing today? Uh, Let me start by pointing out that I don't know who the TTSA constitutional chairperson is. Um, so, I don't know who you are. Uh, but congratulations on your service. Anyway, uh, so today um, we are going to be having a conversation, debate sort of thing about a question that I emailed out last week. Um, as a reminder, here it is in the chat, that adverse possession doctrine affords societies a way to prevent violence over conflicting claims to land. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms for just a few minutes, one for each side, and let you sort of bounce ideas off each other and get your arguments in order. Then we're going to reconvene. We're going to hear from each side sort of formally, and then we'll do things a little more informally, a little more free form. So the way that this is going to be set up is I think the negative has a little bit of a harder time here because the affirmative is basically like the Williams article is basically making an argument for the affirmative. It's not the only argument. Hopefully, we'll hear more than just that, but that is a starting place. And the negative has to build their argument off the critique. So I'm going to unbalance the breakout rooms a little bit by putting 5 of you in the affirmative and 7 in the negative. So it's going to be first come, first serve, 5 seats on first 5 on the affirmative, and then the rest into the negative, or first 7 into the negative if you guys want to challenge. Okay, so let me create the breakout rooms. And there's that. And that one. Okay, so they are now open. And what I have seen is that, okay, we're now up to, so now we can have 6 in the affirmative room now that we've got 13 students in. So 2 have moved in. If you can't get into the breakout rooms, let me know which side you want to be on, and I will assign you if there are seats available. So, and now we've got another person coming in. So now we can have 7. We can have 7 and 7. So 4 seats in the affirmative room filled. Sorry, 3 and 1 in the negative. So if you guys need to know, just tell me which side you want to be moved to if you can't move yourself. Okay. Martina wants a challenge. Two more seats in the affirmative room, and we. Okay, so that's negative and negative. All right. So 2 and 2 now. Couple of seconds, I'm just going to assign you. Okay, so put okay. So let's start by hearing from our affirmative folks. And just as a reminder, oh, 1 second. Just as a reminder, this is the question before the House. So let's hear from our affirmative folks, right? So what is your argument for why adverse possession can prevent violence over land?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Go ahead.
So we are conceding to the statement because linking it back to the situation in Timor-Leste where there were like 5 different categories of land claimants. This would create problems in the court in identifying who exactly has legal ownership of the land, which could cause issues in terms of, when you're looking to sell this property and pass code title and so forth. So adverse possession is a way to limit the violence because one, you're going to have a more effective registration system. You're going to have essentially one effective owner, which is the person who was using this land unprovoked anyways for a long period of time. So it seems that, either way you put it, there's going to be less violence there because this is someone who was on this land for, what is 10, 12, 20 years unprovoked, and more than likely would be unprovoked when they gain this land legally through adverse possession. So, and it also allows for judges to be, more stable, the courts to give a more stable decision when deciding, who exactly should be a successful land claimant.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Kanaya.
Hi, just to add more to what she was saying. So like in the article in Timor-Leste, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, there wasn't an effective system for like solving disputes among those type of land claimants, and it didn't. The current law there, it didn't like say whose rights would prevail. So I can see where violence would stem from that, because if somebody's claiming this land and then another person is claiming this land and there's no law to say, okay, you have rights over this, then I can see where violence would arise. So I think that adverse possession would then come in, because it would be able to determine like whose rights would prevail. It would establish a clear owner of the property. Um, so let's say you're living in a property and then like a long lost heir of the former owner comes along, then they can't tell you get out. So that can help like ease or limit the violence when it comes to disputes among landowners, because as I said before, it establishes the clear owner of the land, so there's no way you can come and just tell somebody get out.
Okay, great. So, anything else from the affirmative? No. Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So let's hear from the negative, right? So, what's the reason why adverse possession does not or cannot prevent violence?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So it is clear that adverse possession can be beneficial to society by encouraging more consistent and efficient use of the land and increasing economic and social development in the communities, especially in cases where the property has been effectively and willingly abandoned by the owner. It must be acknowledged that adverse possession offers a pragmatic and straightforward resolution by conferring the lawful title on occupiers. Overall, the doctrine offers numerous economic and social benefits. However, to claim that adverse possession would prevent violence over conflicting claims to land would be limited. In societies with relatively high levels of violence, such as the Caribbean, when legal owners are unaware that the land is being adversely possessed, have lost possession of their home without any fault of their own, or have been unable to reclaim land from an adverse possessor because of limited familiarity of the legal systems, there would certainly be a higher chance that violence would ensue when a legal owner is dispossessed. Especially in societies like the Caribbean with lower levels of literacy and education, the owners may not feel comfortable or capable enough to address their grievances through the legal system, and would be more likely to resort to the all too common phenomenon of violence in their societies.
Okay.
Oh,
Go ahead, Martina.
moreover, there's increased tensions between neighbors, as well as squatters, original holders of the titles, whereby landowners are induced to evict peaceful squatters out of fear of losing their titles, as well as leasing lands. It also encourages groups of large land invaders, encouraging violent confrontations between owners and invaders.
And to add on to that, violence can also occur where the squatters or occupants have emotional and cultural ties to the land, even if they don't own the land. So it's like so many generations have been living there. So displacing persons from their native land can cause hostilities. And then it may also not necessarily avoid conflict, but may create some where a landowner who is completely unaware that there's a squatter on his land may lose interest in the land even if the squatter has been there for the required time. So this could result in hostility where the landowner who has paid large sums of money to acquire the land has now lost his interest to a person who has not paid to acquire this land.
Okay. So, I really, I want to tell you guys that I really appreciate the work that's evident here. What do we think about the arguments that have been offered, right? Do we have anything from our affirmative friends on rebuttal?
I believe that
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say that I believe the benefits of adverse possession, especially if you, as we're linking it back to the article, would outweigh, some of the little if I must say minute, other disadvantages I guess that may come because of it. So some of these little cultural ties, and so I mean, I still believe that if you have 5 people claiming land and you don't have adverse possession in a way to stabilize the economy and stabilize land ownership in some way or form, you're gonna have even more conflicts. So it's just, to me, choosing between either way you're gonna have some kind of, to me, either way you're gonna have some kind of argument and so over land. But I believe that adverse possession provides the most peaceful,
Okay.
stabilized.
Justin, I saw that your hand was raised. I was not ignoring you. Go ahead. Oh, okay. No problem. Kanaya, were you about to, did you have something to say while Justin is typing?
Yeah, I was just going to rebut one of their points in terms of, I think it was like, it was something to do with Caribbean, like in our region, like there's not enough knowledge of the legal system and it might lead to more problems or something along that line. Well, I think that that's more a problem with the legal system and how interactive it is with us, like our citizens not being aware of like certain rights or and stuff like that. So I think that if you were to bring about this doctrine of adverse possession, then you would have to educate persons to limit like the amount of confusion when it comes to their rights. So to help solve the conflicts that might arise due to lack of knowledge.
So more people should go, should come through the faculty of law. I'm on board with this. So I do want to note, right, that people don't have to know the intricacies of property law to understand the concept of owning something, right? And people can sort of go buy a piece of property that they, and by go I mean BY, not BUY. They can go visit a piece of property that they know that they own, and if there's a squatter on it, they can go, hey, wait a second, I didn't authorize this, and then they know that they need to talk to a lawyer and figure out what the next step is, or possibly call the police, right? So Justin, it looks like you're ready to speak. So you first, since you were waiting, and then Ashlia.
So yes, the arguments put forward by the side against are credible. Yes, violence is endemic to societies and, well, especially our society. Yes, but first question I had was that this whole resolve thing, the topic is centered around Timor, or whatever the thing name, the where the article was about. Because if it was, if the debate is centered on them in terms of preventing the violence there, yes, they would have had a violent past, yeah. But when you instill, we haven't really seen. Sorry, hold on.
So while Justin is thinking, I just want to be clear that the article is about Timor-Leste. It is absolutely about Timor-Leste. But I want you guys to be thinking comparatively. So we should be willing to, I think that the analysis that attempts to draw principles from the Timor-Leste case and apply them elsewhere, I think that's the right way to be thinking about this, is to ask, what does this argument that's about this specific case, what does it offer us for a broader analysis in the larger sense, right, that we can bring back to the Caribbean? So Ashlia, go ahead.
Hi, sir. A positive argument, I think I heard it earlier, was that because it's a legal doctrine, it could encourage parties to seek litigation rather than resorting to violence and hostility. But I think here's when the Caribbean, especially here in Barbados at least, where there's this court backlog, it's going to take so many years in order to get a result or get a judgment. So I think that persons may still resort to violence if in that time period, because sometimes here it takes up to 10 years for a case to be heard. So even though, yes, it's a legal doctrine, I think the backlog could prohibit any,
And that,
any pre.
and I think that raises a really, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your point. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Or I was just going to say, I think that it wouldn't prevent violence. That's all I was going to say.
Okay. I think that raises a really important point, right? And I appreciate you bringing this up. Right. Adverse possession is a doctrine like this isn't a common law doctrine. It's not judge created. It's created by the legislature when it passes statutes of limitations, right? And so I know of no legislature anywhere in the world, maybe the state legislature of New Hampshire. That's a joke. But I know of no legislature that has the capacity to adjudicate adverse possession claims themselves, right? What the legislature does is define a process or a standard by which an adverse possession claim can be adjudicated, right? Generally by defining the limitations period. And then some other entity addresses whether that standard has been met, right? Generally a court, but it can also be an administrative agency. And so Ashlia brings up a really important point. I'm gesturing at my screen like she's sitting there on the screen. Sorry. But what does it, can the creation of a doctrine prevent violence where there's not the institutional capacity to effectively apply the doctrine? What do you think? Justin, I really appreciate your patience. Go ahead, and then Isabella.
Oh no, I'm typing my think piece in the chat.
Okay, that's fine. Isabella, you are off mute. or maybe your sound isn't working. Somebody came off mute and I interrupted them. Ashley, go ahead.
Oh, in response to your question, I think maybe if it was a case where you could go to court like tomorrow and get a judgment tomorrow, maybe that could prevent any violence. I think violence at the end of the day might still be an individual option, but I think if we were getting results literally tomorrow or next week, that could limit some of the violence.
Or even just if the timeline was measured in months rather than years, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
You know, if you know that you have to wait 6 months to get your dispute resolved, you're probably more likely to be willing to wait than if you know you're going to have to wait a decade.
Agreed.
So, yeah. So what do we? So do we think that adverse possession standing alone can reduce violence, or do we think that it's necessary to have this additional institutional capacity?
I don't think a legal doctrine can solve a societal issue. I think that law is not this concept where it's separated from sociological factors, etc. So I think that at the end of the day, even though you create a legal doctrine, there's no way to affirmatively say, okay, this is definitely going to solve this problem or this is going to prevent violence. So,
okay. Is there anybody who wants to take this stance, who wants to argue that the doctrine standing alone can accomplish something? No. Okay. Well, I don't know that I think that I don't know that I agree with it. So, okay, let's see what Justin says. So Justin makes a really helpful point that violence is something that happens, in the absence of law. It can happen where there is law as well, but if there's no law, then violence is significantly more likely because it's a self-help mechanism. So I think that's a really important point, that the creation of law where there is none is an important tool for preventing violence, sort of regardless of the institutional capacity. So I think that's a really helpful and important point. So what questions do you have about the conversation that we've had so far?
Sir,
Go ahead.
so what is your position in this debate? Like, what do you think?
So I tend to come down on the side of that policymaking is very different from student union debate, which is not really a fair answer. But let me explain. It is very easy, if you approach policymaking like a sort of debate environment, to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? To say that the solution that is on the table doesn't solve everything, every ill that we're trying to solve for, and so we can't do anything. And the implication of that argument is that a lower level of misery is worse than a higher level of misery, because you can't get to no misery. And I find that argument really unpersuasive and bizarre, frankly, right? So the broader issue, right, in actual policy making, what we would be doing is we would be considering multiple alternatives and trying to sort of discern the most effective policy mix. And so there might be room for creating an adverse possession doctrine if none exists, or and there might be room for strengthening institutional capacity as part of the policy mix, right? Improving judicial training, increasing the number of judges, increasing support staff, right? Whatever mechanisms we choose to use to allow better legal decisions to come down faster, right? There's room in actual policymaking to be doing multiple things. And I think that when we treat policymaking as a student union debate, right, the way that folks like Jacob Rees-Mogg does in the House of Commons in London, or Dominic Cummings out of Number 10, I think that we do democracy a serious disservice. And so that's my opinion, that that these sort of artificially constructed questions give us insight into this sort of conjoint question, right? Status quo versus this alternative. But they don't give us a lot of insight about what the best policy is. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay, great. So to wrap this up, I want to take this and sort of throw a question at you that's a little closer to home, right? You guys are probably aware, since you're from the region, I only very recently learned about it, that 2/3 of the island of Montserrat is uninhabitable right now. It's an exclusion zone caused by a volcano, blah, 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 right? You guys know all of this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But this only happened about 25 years ago, right? So there are people living today who lived and worked in the part of the island that is currently uninhabitable, who own property in the exclusion zone. And someday, the experts are going to tell us that it's safe to go back. It might be 5 years from now, it might be 25 years from now, it might be 105 years from now. But that day is going to come. And one question that may be relevant is, what do we do with all of these titles of people who fled and never came back? Ooh, ooh, wow. Ooh, can I feel like somebody just opened an umbrella over me. The shade. Wow. um, so to put actual numbers on it, about 8,000 people have fled Montserrat, mostly to the United Kingdom. Okay. But the larger question is, right, how do we handle this if we can't determine who the title owner is, right? What if we're 100 years from now and that's how long it takes for the volcano to settle down? And, you know, one thing that is sort of worth remembering is that the capital of Montserrat's actually in the exclusion zone, right? And so it is possible, I don't know, I haven't checked or called to determine, but it is possible that the property records in Montserrat were not saved, that they were abandoned. And so it may be that we can't determine who is the paper title owner. And so at that point, how should we proceed? Should the government just sort of restart issuing patents, or should we create a framework for folks to settle and develop? I mean, I think there's a strong possibility that when the volcano does calm back down, that the exclusion zone could become very wealthy. You know, volcanic ash is that carries a lot of soil nutrients, and it can be a very rich agricultural additive. So it sounds like, you know, basically you guys are on board with the notion of you know, adverse possession as a mechanism for dealing with a loss of title, right? A sort of a systemic loss of title, right? Reassigning title based on possession and use. Right, I agree, Devetti, that you guys absolutely led off by saying adverse possession has its place, it brings its benefits, but it doesn't solve this particular problem of violence, right? We're now sort of moving beyond the debate question and asking sort of a broader policy question. So I think that we all sort of agree with that. So last chance. What, you know, any last questions before we wrap things up today? No questions? Okay. Well, in that case, I want to be clear. I really appreciate you guys' hard work and engagement, and I want to say that I appreciate the fact that you guys very clearly were engaged with and thinking about the article. So I appreciate that, and I will see you guys tomorrow. So take care and bye.